Hello, Internet. I wanted to follow up with kind of a part two of a video I did. It's probably been almost a couple of months ago, maybe even longer, on deconstruction of belief systems. That's what I called it anyway. Um, it's just a topic that's been on my mind a lot because of things that are going on right now within the uh, Christian community as a whole, uh, involving scandals and disappointments and cynicism that are directed towards leadership and structures within the Christian world. Um, I made it clear in the last video that this is not just a Christian thing. I think that deconstruction of faith, deconstruction of religious mentality or religious structure in a person's life is not confined to just Christianity. And again, I don't want to go over all that because I talked about it in the first video that I did on this topic. And if you're interested, you could go back and look at that. But anyway, to make a long story short, I just think that deconstruction can happen to someone with regard to any belief system. You could even be an atheist. You could be a lifelong atheist, or even a lifelong sort of confirmed agnostic and go through a deconstruction process. Because basically what the word deconstruction means with regards to these issues is that you are breaking down instead of building up a system. And again, we're talking about belief systems. So contrary to popular notion, this is not something that just goes on in the Christian world. Whether you come from a Catholic background and you just decide that you have outgrown it, whether you are some kind of Protestant, even mainline Protestant, and you just sort of feel that your mainline Protestant belief structures don't serve you anymore, and they don't really resonate, and they don't really define you. But again, that could happen if you have been a lifelong atheist, and suddenly you start realizing that all of the things that you built your worldview on with regard to spirituality and religion are falling apart. The funny thing is, we could go even beyond religion, and we could talk about politics. There's plenty of people who deconstruct from their political worldview that they have held for years or decades or even their whole life, and all of a sudden they see things from a completely different point of view. So, as I mentioned in the last video, I am endlessly fascinated by this kind of stuff, and when I do my perusal, through certain things on social media and especially YouTube, I'm always sort of drawn into discussions about people completely reevaluating the worldview that they sort of evolved as a person in the midst of or in the context of, but then they reach a certain point in life, things happen. It's usually not one thing or even five things. Usually it's dozens of things that happen in people's lives. Circumstances that cause them to become very uncomfortable with their belief system. Whether you're a charismatic or whether you are a staunch liberal politically, whether you are, I don't know, on any place along the spectrum of belief systems, you can come to a point where you just say, wait a minute, this is something that I've always just sort of taken for granted. This is a belief system that I have always just sort of been on autopilot under, and suddenly you're asking questions. You're looking at the reality of your life, your communities, your family and friends, your career, your values and priorities, and suddenly you're thinking, wait a minute, this doesn't fit anymore. And you know, what's interesting to me is I touched on this a little bit in the last video. What's interesting to me is that a lot of people will, I think people respond in three different ways. Let's put it that way. I think that people are very uncomfortable. Some people, let's say category number one, people are very uncomfortable with that, and therefore they sweep it under the carpet and they just sort of hunker down, and that causes them to just sort of lash out in anger towards anybody who disagrees with them because they feel like they have to hold tight to this belief system that's always been so closely attached to their identity. And so they don't grow. They don't evolve. They don't open their mind enough to consider something else. And I'm not saying necessarily rejection of their belief system, but to move to a deeper level of understanding. Instead, they go into a defensive posture. That's number one. Number two is I think people can sort of go the other way, and they become cynical. They become very, what's the right word? Depressed. That's not the word I'm looking for, but cynical, disillusioned. Maybe that's the better word. They become cynical and disillusioned, and they basically throw the baby out with the bathwater. So that's the opposite of the person that goes into the defensive posture just because they don't want to rock the boat. They don't really want to confront their questions. The other extreme is people who are just like, this is all, excuse my French, BS, and they throw the baby out with the bathwater and they completely walk away from their belief system that has been a part of their identity, a part of their life, a part of their social community structure for however many years or decades, even whole life. So these are the people that just kind of, maybe we say, go off the deep end, and they just completely walk away. Maybe you just walk away from your church and you never go back. Maybe you just decide that every single thing that has to do with politics is garbage and a sham, and therefore you decide not to pay any attention anymore. No matter whether you're on the right or the left, you just decide to throw it all out, right? Anyway, that's number two. Number three, which of course I think is the right path, is there are people who allow themselves to deconstruct. And I think that can be in a positive way. There are people who allow themselves to ask the hard questions. They allow themselves to struggle. They allow themselves to maybe read some things that they wouldn't have read a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago because they would have thought that it was heresy. They do some exploration so that they can make their belief system their own. They test things, they examine things. And the reason I believe this is the right way to go is because I feel like this is the story of my life. I mentioned, again, the last video, I keep referencing it, so if you haven't watched it, go back and take a look. I feel like I've had several crisis points in my life. I'm going to be 60 years old this year. So I think I'm getting to the place in life where I can say I've been around the block a few times. I've been exposed to a lot of things in my life. And I have gone through bottlenecks. I have gone through crisis periods where I've had to reevaluate what I believe and why I believe it. I have read things that are counter to my natural belief system because I want to be challenged. And I have had friends and maybe not so much family. I think my family has been very, very understanding over the course of my life. But I have had friends, I've had people that I know who have been very critical of me for asking certain questions, reading certain literature, allowing myself to be exposed to certain theologies, doctrines, um, philosophies, because they think, oh, he's going off the rails. He's going to crash and burn. And yet I've learned that I can say honestly, and this is something that I feel like is part of the thing that I need to let people know in my life. I feel like the things that have challenged me in my life, where I have allowed myself to ask questions, are the very things that have actually strengthened my faith. They have actually served, it's kind of like the iron sharpening iron or sandpaper principle, where you allow yourself to test things. And for me, it has caused me to come out with a diamond of faith that I'm not saying it's not going to continue to be challenged. In fact, with my health problems of the last year and few months, I've had to do more reevaluating and asking really hard questions about why I believe what I believe and what I think is the meaning, the real meaning of life and the afterlife. But anyway, the point, I'm not saying I won't continue to have questions, but I feel like what I've been through in my life, in giving myself permission to ask questions, giving myself permission to look at alternate viewpoints, has actually refined my personal belief system, my faith, to allow me to grow and to have deeper conviction that is truly my own, and that is truly, in my opinion, valuable. It's sort of like the refiner's fire. Again, I'm from a Christian background, so a lot of my analogies or figures of speech have to do with things that come from the Bible, things that Christ said himself. But just the whole refiner's fire principle, the dross that rises to the surface and you have to scoop it off. I really feel like I've been through the fire. I've been through that process of burning things away. And it has not been very easy. But you know what? It wouldn't have happened at all. I can see places in my life where I could have either gone into, number one, the defensive posture and not grown and been a stick in the mud and been a very narrow-minded, dogmatic person, or I could have gone the other way and thrown everything out and become a cynic and a person who doesn't have any belief in anything solid or enduring. Those are the two extremes. So I'm grateful for the deconstruction that has happened at different places in my life. And you know what? I know that there are a few people out there that are watching this that you just can't relate to this at all, and that's fine. However, I do know some of you, some extremely close friends, I would call you life travel partners who have been through the same thing, and you can bear witness, or it resonates with you that what I'm saying is something that you've been through yourself. So, I'm still not getting into a lot of details on this, mainly just because I think for everybody it's so different. Some people it's family issues, some people it's personal identity issues, some people it's political issues, some people it's purely church structure, leadership issues, where you've been disappointed by a leader, and so you've just chucked it because that leader fell and that leader was exposed as a human. Surprise, surprise. So anyway, we all have different things that we've walked through in our lives, and nobody has the same story. This is not a cookie cutter deal. So, okay, this is getting to be extremely long, and I'm going to stop right now. But as always, thank you so much for listening, and I hope that this resonates with you. Subscribe to the channel if you would like to do that. Hit the like button if you feel inspired to do that. And also, I just love your comments. Anybody who wants to comment, I'm very happy to talk about these kinds of things. So thank you very much and enjoy your January.